All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is 8:30 a.m. We're going to call the meeting of the Board of Regents of the Del Mar College District to order for the continuation of our board retreat. It is Friday, November 19th. I'm going to call roll. Mr. Bennett? Here. Mr. Kelly? Here. Ms. Averett? Here. Mr. Garza? Here. Dr. Adami? Here. Dr. Turner could not be with us today. Ms. Hutchison? Here. And Dr. Villarreal?
Here.
I'm Carol Scott. We have a quorum and can conduct business. Dr. Escamilla will be here shortly. He is running just a couple. Oh, there he is. There he is. But the most important thing before we get started with the retreat is to know how the Flower Bluff Hornets did last night.
47-0. On to the next round.
All right, way to go. 47-7. All right. Great to know. Great to know. Congratulations to the Hornets. So we're going to turn it back over to Dr. Ebersol to continue with our retreat. I want to welcome staff this morning. Thank you all for being here.
All right. Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Oh, we know them all.
I'm curious. So just tell me who you are here.
I'm John Stryboff, Vice President and Chief Physical Facilities Officer.
All right.
I'm John Behalka, Vice President and Chief Academic Officer.
All right, good.
Executive Director.
All right.
Cheryl Sanders, and I'm Associate Vice President.
All right. Student affairs.
Garcia, Vice President, and Skip.
Tricia Dominguez, Interim Vice President, Student Affairs.
All right.
Gary McFarland, Vice President, Administration and Community.
Justin Honey, Stephanie Diaz.
Seattle.
Linda Ortiz, Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer.
All right.
And Mayor Queen, Executive Director.
All right. I hope the college will be all right today. Everybody, yeah. We're all here, man. So, well, my name is Brad Ebersol, and I'm consultant for the Association of Community College Trustees. Maybe you know this, but I had a community college career in Community College of Baltimore County. I was vice president at Baton Rouge Community College, and I was president of a community college in Ohio for a number of years. And now so the last couple of years, I've worked with ACCT doing these board retreats and executive searches, and that's pretty much what we've done. So I have my back to you. Sorry about that. And the chart's up here, and I'm going to be focused on this group. So there you go. All right. Thanks, everybody. All right, so here we go. I thought we had a good day yesterday. There was a lot of good conversation and discussion about being a board and where you think you are as a board, talking a bit about futures, and I felt anyhow that it was a good conversation. When we went over the assessment, I think we had some honest discussion about what we saw in the assessment, and hopefully we're making some progress. What I will do is after the retreat, then get some notes together, and I do write a summary and share it with Carol. It's interesting. I learned more and more about, of course, the college, but I learned more and more about Corpus Christi too. And the two are so interrelated, and about the populations. And appreciated the presentation yesterday a little bit. Populations and the groups and the education. And then last night I was very fortunate to have a dinner with Carol and her husband at the top of the Omni. So that was a nice thing. But what was fun about it was that you look out over Corpus Christi, and although it was lights, I could say, so what am I looking at here? And what do I see? And so I got a nice sense of, what's across the bay. And she said, over there is where somebody said we need to start reaching out to that area. So that's over in that section of town. So you start to get something in your mind about what's what. So I appreciated it very much indeed. So if our agenda, if I look at these goals real quick, what we did was one was get to know each other on a more personal basis. So we know Wednesday night we did really well with that, and I have to tell you that that's an exercise that I do with a lot of boards, but you exceeded everybody in that regard about sharing information, and so that was a start. But in achieving that one also, as you're as you're working together in the groups, you're getting to know each other in some different ways too. So I feel like, you know, that bit of team building, getting to know each other is good. We talked about review and assess characteristics of effective Board of Regents, and we went through all that, and that was good. The assessment, as I just mentioned, I think we used the assessment. You know, it's a nice thing you do it, but to bring it back and to actually put it to use is good, and we got some conclusions from that as well. And then we did this little futures piece that you did, and I have a nice, we summarized some of those comments, so we'll be using that as well. So today we're going to do board goals. So it's objective number 6 is what we have. We'll go back to the 5 one, but board goals and then board performance. And Linda and I talked a little bit about being a medium, low, and high-performing board and trying to get yourself up to the best you can be, but it's, you know, what exactly does that mean is what we're trying to do as well. So, goals. I handed out, you had some articles. You know, I didn't give any homework, but I did hand out the articles. So, you know, the reason for sharing these is to get it in your mind, you know, where some of the community college efforts are and where they're going in that regard. And let me make sure, okay, good. All right, so goals. So we have talked about enrollment and some of the things that are going on. That first article I have, why enrollment is down, especially among students of color. And I'm just going to just tell you about it quickly, but it says that, you know, that's where we've suffered a good bit. Do you have that, Rudy? I think it was laid at your table. Did you put one out? Mm-hmm. Here's one here. You got it? Good. Okay. So, you know, it says pretty much that that's one area where we've lost. Now, your population that I'm hearing is largely Hispanic, but I don't know how that's impacted. You know, largely people of color, African American, in a lot of these, but they say that is a population that we've largely lost, and because their priorities went other ways. And they say it's often, too, the low income that are at risk, at the greatest risk for enrollment. And you have shared with me that in Corpus Christi, that's a fairly significant population. So we know who we are in community college. We know who we're trying to reach. And that is a population that we've seen decline. So it's a challenge for us. So I leave that one with you. Homework or no homework, you know, if you want to read it, you can go through it as well. Then the next one that I included there as well is the pandemic hit the working class the hardest, and the community and the college that served them. And this is right behind the one that we handed out. So, and that, you know, the heading pretty much tells you what we're thinking about. But they're saying many of these people, if they have opportunity to work, they're going to go to work. And there are some jobs now, and if they need the work, they're going to go to work. So we're losing that particular population in a pretty significant way. Earlier, though, I did clip a number of articles in the packet. So, and I'm just going to go through them. You can look at them another time, but enrollments continue to slide, and that's a lot of what we've talked about, and you know, what some of the history is behind it and where it's occurred. There is an article in there, too. Enrollment at Texas public universities inches ahead of community colleges for the first time. And, you know, we're so proud of who we are that it surprises us that we're not doing better in terms of enrollment against even some of our counterparts in that regard. And we're just, community colleges all over are really just trying to figure out exactly what that's going. But that was a particularly interesting article, and that's in the packet. There's another that says, will declines in community college enrollment widen Texas skilled labor gap? So Mark has been talking about his effort in continuing education, which is really, as well as all of our degree programs and certificate programs, that continuing ed is a real straight, direct focus on building the workforce in that way. But then, so it says, is that going to impact the skilled labor force that Texas is missing as well? When I share these with you, be thinking goals for the board. So it's information, but you should be thinking enrollment, skilled workforce, meeting the needs of Texas workforce. So when we get to look at your goals, maybe they're reflected in that. So that's the purpose for a lot of those. An interesting one, too, is the debt crisis will be exacerbated after Biden cut free community colleges from the $1.75 trillion social spending plan. And so they wonder, will our students, and it won't help us, without some more assistance in financial aid, will that hurt their enrollment? And will that be a barrier for them as well? We were hanging on, and I don't know, I know the free community college piece was a bit of a question, and people were wondering exactly what does that mean. And as Mark knows, and you know, the Promise program, College Promise as it was referred to, and you probably know that many states and counties and cities have initiated, was to be national in a large way. So free community college. I don't know that anybody really had a handle on what it meant, exactly how it was going to be implemented, but conceptually, it sounded great. At least we thought that our students would have the opportunity to come to school and not incur debt, is largely what it's about. So what was your feeling about that free community college thing? Bill, did you have any thoughts on that?
The obvious advantage to free community college.
Yeah.
It is clear that we service a community that has a lot of areas to serve.
Yeah.
That's only a people on our board.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We've heard testimony from people who are on our own board. And quite honestly, in school, I experienced it myself. When, not community college, but when I was in law school, I was on my own and living on a shoestring to the point where I should have been hospitalized for malnutrition. So I'm very much aware of what kind of a barrier that can be.
All right. So you saw that initiative, the Free Community College Initiative, as a positive.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Rudy, what was your take on it all?
Yeah, I saw it as a positive. Of course, you have concerns about how the program's going to roll out.
Right.
Just like we have state funding, and for a lot of years, the large universities, the big colleges got the money in this state, and the small colleges, particularly South Texas, suffered in funding. Obviously the need is there.
Right.
For those folks that suffer or that struggle with their finances in order to make it through college, there's a huge need. And I think as far as I'm concerned, Del Mar College does a great job in being able to try to help those students. But I think there's always more needed. But the only concern I had was how were those dollars going to be rolled out, and were the dollars actually going to reach the areas of greater need? That's the concern I had.
Yeah. Ed, what was your thought on it?
I had mixed emotions.
Yeah.
First of all, when you invest in your education, you tend to really focus on it. So I think some personal investment's required from most people to get the most out of their education. Secondly, we generate about $25 million in tuition revenue, and we have about $19 million in financial aid. So we have a small gap that's not met by the financial aid.
Right.
But only 50-some% of our students are actually qualifying for financial aid. So it's almost free to most of them. And it can be free, or it can be more free to many more, a larger percentage of them, if they'll fill out the paperwork.
Yeah.
So I don't think completely free is a really good idea.
Right.
But I think debt-free is an awfully good idea.
Yeah. We heard that yesterday. But that's a good point. Linda, what's your thought? Public school person, and then,
Well, I've always thought that there should be not only K-12, but K-16 support
Yeah.
and help,
okay,
and to continue that on. I think Mr. Bennett brings up a great point. I think that when you do have that there's more of an ownership and investment, but, I was just thinking about I have two nieces, I have a niece and a nephew that actually go to Del Mar, and they currently work as waiters at Outback. And my sister
What do
is
they- oh, okay, wait.
at
Yeah,
Outback
yeah.
Restaurant to pay for their tuition. And they struggle.
yeah,
And they've been at Del Mar for about 4 years, not because they can't do the work, but because they don't qualify for financial aid. But they work every single day so they can get their tuition to pay tuition.
Right.
And even though it's at I think the tuition is at a great price and so forth for what they're getting, they're working themselves. So I see it personally. I understand that investment and that ownership of wanting to work your way through it, but I think some kids do not have
yeah,
they just don't have the resources to get there.
Right.
So I would definitely like to see a K-16, even a K-14 type support system for all students.
we're talking about goals this morning, board goals. So this conversation is for you to take that into when we get to the point where our goals. It is financial security and reducing debt a significant piece, because we were holding on to a free community college, and that's gone, at least in that big picture notion. But as Ed said, we still have federal aid, scholarships. We have lots of other things that we've always used to keep it down, but students do still incur debt. Do you know what the average debt is for a Del Mar student?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but about, is it $6,000 to $7,000, somewhere in there?
Yes, and I will add.
It's less than 10 for sure.
Lowest ag, our peer.
Yep, get to a mic.
So what's the number?
It's less than 10,000. It's probably around 7,000. We're gonna. We got somebody behind you. Go ahead.
Students still.
We are at the lowest ag of our peer group. That's the final.
That's our point is students get debt. They get debt. That's right. We do the best we can, but students are still going to walk away with some debt. And we know that the jobs they get and they take it with them, they'll incur that. So that's a concept for the board to keep in mind. And as we're hearing, you're doing a good job keeping it down, but it's still a debt. Anybody else want to say anything about that, Nick or Susan? You're thinking?
I'd just say briefly, I'm a big supporter of public education, and I agree. I think most people will agree K through 12. We don't debate whether there should be public
Yeah.
free education,
Right.
and yet we stop at community college. So to me,
Yeah.
it's not that big
All
a
right.
leap. And as
Well, you
far
have-
as,
yeah.
I'm sorry, just to also respond with the idea of making an investment, I agree, you've got to have skin in
Yeah.
the game, so to speak. But I think those students who show up, do the work,
Yeah.
that's their investment.
Right,
They're putting the
right.
sweat in.
Nick, if you want to say.
Yeah,
share
you know,
something.
of course, we want to see free college, but implementation is probably one of the biggest
Yeah,
obstacles.
yeah,
How you gonna get it done?
right.
We do need money, don't we?
Has that been tried in other states?
Yeah.
And to what degree has it been successful?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know.
Everybody a chance. Libby? Yeah, go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Do we know how, I heard California did that, right? And Georgia?
Yeah, Tennessee and a couple of states do have the free community college.
How did they pay for it?
Oh, you'd have to find out, but it's, the money comes from somewhere.
Well-
Doesn't Dallas do something?
Dallas has a promise, but it's a localized deal. It's not across the board like they're anticipating. It's not complete yet, Mary, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, some of them are for just high school students, or it comes out that it's.
Kalamazoo was one of the first ones to do a college promise kind of program.
Yeah.
And they did it for local students, funded by local foundations and corporations. And if you graduated from a local school, you were guaranteed the first 2
Yeah,
years of
something
community
like
college.
that,
Yeah.
exactly. So there's been twists and parts to it. I was at
Right.
Community College of Baltimore County, and they did the same thing, but it got to be high school graduates, tuition free. So, but the idea was to try and reduce the cost of an education. So we, those other articles that our low-income students are struggling the most, and your example, Linda, of somebody that is trying to work all the time and is still persevering, like many of you have.
And
get in
just
there,
to
did
clarify, I mean, they could get loans.
Yeah,
But, we have tapes in our mind, and in our family, my mom and dad, it's like, don't get a loan, don't get a loan, you don't want to be saddled with a loan, you don't. So
Yeah.
we all went through school working
Yeah.
to pay for tuition, and it sort of has filtered down. I said, get a loan, just get a loan, it's not going to be that much. No, we don't want to do that, we don't want to do that.
Yeah,
So, so they might stay off a semester
Mm-hmm.
and work enough to be able to go on. So, I admire their tenacity. I admire what they're doing and their work ethic, but it's a struggle.
struggle.
Yeah.
I heard too something, there was a cultural thing about just paying as you go or paying cash. So that, if that notion is there, I mean, it's a local culture or moray or something, that's something to consider too.
You said the word cash, and we talk about this fairly regularly, especially as we're going into discussions about student charges. The cash society that we have out there is enormous.
Is that right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's all cash, and this is the prime example of
Yeah.
Dr. Villarreal's nieces
Mhm.
out there. They pay as they go.
Mhm.
And literally when we are enrolling students and so forth, we have to take exceptional measures to deal with large amounts of cash when
Isn't that
students are
interesting?
registering.
I mean, $1,000 or something like $1,000 of cash or something like that.
Each.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, or
Mhm.
whatever the bill is, 300, 400, but 300
Yeah.
or 400 at a time times several thousand
Right,
gets
right,
up there
right.
real fast.
So, board goals, it's just for you to be thinking, yeah, Carol.
I was hoping that we were going to be able to talk about COVID and some of the other, we had on here,
Yeah.
be able to talk about COVID and student success and board advocacy and other things this
Yeah.
morning. So I was
We'll
hoping
come
we
to
weren't
those.
going to only talk about free college for.
No, we're gonna get to all those. Everything does, so. The other article then too is colleges back diversity efforts. And, that was something that everybody here mentioned about a piece of that and the enrollment and the diversity that comes with that too. So keep that in mind as they're doing that. And there is that equity action agenda that's in here as well. So, that's just something later to have that you'll be able to keep and work with. So those are some thoughts. I'm gonna go follow Carol's lead on that then. Some of the other topics, and again, the notion is about what your goals will be, are that the impact of COVID has been on the institution in that way. And we went through a number of different pieces related to that. So Nick, what has been your thought on the students and the impact of COVID?
Well, in the beginning, when it happened, the goal was continue education, but by the same time, keeping the community at large safe. So we saw the implementation of online and versus face-to-face, and for physicians like us, sometimes they want to go telehealth, which for chiropractors is difficult.
Right.
The struggle was there because you saw it in the beginning when from the experience of people that I've talked to, getting used to the virtual aspect of it. So that's the number one goal. But now it seems to be the norm. And so how's that going to affect us 5 years down the road?
Right.
Are they going to want to stay a hybrid, or are we going back to face-to-face? So what's going to be the norm? Are we going to give them the choice? So
So that's for the board to be thinking, what's
Yeah.
going to be the impact on that? So your questions, exactly the questions you ask, is it going to be hybrid, and is it going to be that? And that's what the board questions are, that come to that.
So,
Bill, yeah.
over the next several months, I really would like us to have some in-depth conversations around resources and priorities about what needs to change. We're not going to come up with those answers today. We're going to come up maybe with a lot of questions today, but as we're thinking about enrollment, and we're thinking about the challenges of our current students as well as our students that are coming, what do we as a team, and so I'm glad that the staff is here today, what do we need to know? What do we don't know? What are we making assumptions are? And as we go through, okay, we assumed this was happening, but now 6 months later, that assumption was wrong. We need to tweak it here. But let's have really good conversations around what is going to evolve. I don't expect you all to have a crystal ball, because that's not realistic. But what do we think is going to work? And then 6 months from now, okay, that worked, but some of this didn't, and now we're going to do this. I really want to be robust in that conversation over the next couple of years, because I think it is going to be integral to whether or not our students are successful coming out of this. And I hate the word new normal, but what becomes higher education and what becomes Del Mar College. So that's kind of where I'm going with this. I don't expect the answers today, but gosh, and we know we need a change. So what does that change look like? How are we going to manage that change, and what resources do you need to make that change happen in a positive nature for our current and our future students?
With that same thought, I think it's so important that we talk to the students and get their feelings about this, because it was real interesting to me that a lot of the articles that I was reading, and even my son, they didn't want to do it virtual. They wanted their program to be, hands-on, face-to-face, at the campus, experiencing. And maybe that was just, but I read a lot of the articles that kids were saying, well, I'm not going to go to school this semester because it's going to be virtual. And whereas I would have thought, oh man, virtual, yes, I can be in my pajamas and do my, my work if I need to at home. They weren't saying that. So what does that mean? We might have a feeling this is the way we need to go, but what are the students really asking for their programs, their programs of study? And I think we need to make sure we don't leave that aspect out.
Right. Yeah, Mark, you look like.
So I know there's a lot of energy coming from here in response. I can just feel it, radiating from over here, from the executive team. But we've learned a lot. You're right. And when it's one case with one part of the continuum of our students, it's not the case for others. Yes, there's a lot that like the online learning, but what we hear, Patricia, John, unless I'm hearing something different, we're hearing everything, but what we're hearing more of is we want back in the classroom. They need back in the classroom, whether they want it or not.
Yeah.
The learning loss that's taking place is the biggest challenge of this whole thing. Yeah, there's some that are going to hit the tops of the waves and never stop. Okay, we're not talking about them. We're going back to the bell curve, and we're looking in the middle, and we're trying to address through utility the most that we can. And by far, the feedback has been, yeah, there'll be some permanency that stays with the electronic format and stuff even for some faculty, but the need for the needs of our students call for face-to-face, and they're calling for it too. Am I missing something, Dr. Jonda or Patricia? Is that accurate? That's sure.
Some of them skill-based, they really want face-to-face.
Yeah.
And, some of the core courses, they're signing up online versus face-to-face.
Yeah.
It just depends.
This.
For this group, though, what we're thinking about is board goals. So when we look at the existing goals, is this something the focus, and what Carol just articulated in terms of having that conversation and thinking where you want to move is good for that. So the COVID piece is the learning environment, and it's the financial piece as well that goes with that, and the lifestyle piece that goes with that. Also then, Carol, in that list that we had was student success, retention, and persistence, and the impact on that. And I know that's something that you're thinking about in a good way. Do you want to mention something about that?
Well, I think I've articulated it a couple different ways over the last several days, but again, what are we going to do about providing additional services? When I think about free college tuition, for example, I don't think about it as just the tuition, because what those students need, as much as they might need financial help, is the wraparound services and tutoring, and we may need smaller teacher-student ratios so that the professors can spend additional time. I mean, the learning gaps is what we're making assumptions about learning gaps, but we really won't know it until our faculty get their hands on those students. So what kind of flexibility do we need? What kind of resources are going to be necessary to help those students through that process? We are not going to be able to look in the rearview mirror and think about what worked, 2 years ago, what worked last fiscal year. We almost have to throw, to me, all of that out the window and really be focusing on what is changing in real time.
Yeah.
That's the kind of flexibility. That's why I'm saying as a board, we need to be really prepared for that kind of flexibility, those
Right.
kinds of conversations. And we've got to give Mark and his staff and faculty the room to come have those conversations. If we want to have the tough conversations and really get into understanding the tension, we have to be prepared for failure. We have to be prepared to try things that we hope will work but may not.
Right.
And there's got to be room. We've got to have intellectual and honest room for that to occur.
I think the next steps in framing it with the strategic plan and adjusting it, documenting it, putting it on paper for the next version of our strategic plan is in front of us next year. And that's what
Good.
this year that's what every year should hold. It should be that ongoing conversation about how we can improve not just the plan for the plan's sake, but the details within the plan so that we are evolving on a regular basis and adjusting, as you're saying.
Right.
So, I mean, and I think even as soon as next month, I know Patricia and team are working on a enrollment management plan to talk about those kinds of things and strategies and the like. And I think that'll be here in just a couple short weeks. So I think the timing is really good for that.
On the way over,
Yeah.
I was checking in with one of the superintendents that I work with in the region, a K-12 superintendent, somebody who's an advocate for Del Mar, an advocate for A&M Corpus Christi and Kingsville. And he asked about the training. He said, hey, how's that board training going? I said, it really went well. We had some really good dialogue, and we were
Yeah.
sort of talking. And he said, Linda, he said, I'm going to tell you something. He goes, I don't think there's a university or a college that really understands what's going on in K-12 right now.
Yeah.
And they were talking about it wasn't a put down at all. He said,
Yeah.
things are so different. And he goes, and the struggles that we're having academically, socially, behaviorally, he said, are so huge. I don't think anybody truly realized what's going to happen in the next couple of years as they move on.
Right.
And so, yeah, those are some powerful words.
So, go ahead, Bill.
The difference being, and I've heard talk about K through 14, K through 16, but you're mandated. You got to go to school through high school. And so it's a little more selective who's going to want to go to a junior college or a four-year university. So hopefully, and trust me, my wife is an assistant principal, so I am very much aware of the struggles at K through 12. But hopefully we're getting the students who are more motivated and who do want to learn. But I suspect you're right. We are going to see more remedial. We are going to see more challenges, but hopefully we're seeing the most motivated students.
In terms of board goals, though, I liked what Carol said, particularly about the flexibility in giving Mark and his team some latitude to try to address the students' needs that were already diverse, right? Prior to COVID, we didn't have a monolithic group of students where we could, do the same thing for every single student. And now I think their challenges are probably even more diverse because having to adjust to the online learning, which many of them did but found difficult. Often when we go through changes professionally, we have the stability of our home or support network to help see us through those changes. Well, chances are most people's homes or support network were also disrupted during COVID with either illness or death or loss of job or whatever. And so, we've probably got students who really don't have a good sense of security about them, and now trying to navigate their education too.
Right. So from a board perspective, so the staff, Mark and the staff, as he mentioned, enrollment management plan for the board, it's what's the question? So if you put that, what would be your question as a board member to the staff?
Well, my question would be, what processes, as Carol likes to say, what resources, what processes, what plans, what support do we have in place to address all of those, that dozens, hundreds of needs, varying needs that we're going to see from the students?
That's perfect. And that's the board role. The board role is to ask the question.
Right.
Mark and his group are going to come up with the answer for you. Yeah.
So every one of us here are trained in some form that's at very high levels of research here.
Yeah.
And the way most research training, most of the training begins is with a problem statement.
Yeah, that's right.
And then the research
Exactly.
questions. And then the research questions. So if you all can think about that, we can get inside all these heads real fast.
Right.
If you start off with those two things.
So
You
that's
go back to your graduate work, and that's exactly the way we're trained.
Exactly.
And so, as such, for the board to know, what's the problem, or what are the problems, and then what are the underlying questions that come from there, we can really take off, and as I like to say, start cooking with grease.
So that's a critical question. And that's what the board retreat's about. And we talked yesterday, board role, staff role, president's role. The board's role, as Mark just said, is what's the question? And that's the big piece of it. So, and Carol, yours too. How would you state your question about persistence and perseverance?
Are we, so twofold, what do we know about, are we prepared for this changing student, the student who has most definitely changed in terms of academic instruction and what they're going to need to succeed academically, in addition to the support piece that Libby was talking about. But then the other piece is, that I've been talking about a lot, is what are we doing to attract those students? The jobs are still there that need middle skill. We heard a term that Brian Daniel used, director of the Texas Workforce Commission, talks about these middle skill jobs, which are perfect for community college graduates.
Right.
And there's a gap of about 1.4 million workers in the state of Texas. The jobs are there, the workers are not, and there's a gap across the state of about 1.4 million today.
Yeah.
So are we what do we have to entice and encourage students to come in and enroll and finish a degree?
There you go.
So it's two issues. It's around the academics, the changing academic instruction, and then the recruitment and persistence of our students.
Right. And that's your question on enticing them to come, but you also had a lot of thoughts on the persistence piece too, and the retention. And it's the same kind of question for a board to want to know, how are you enticing students to persevere at the same time? So those are two big pieces. And Linda, yours was largely instructional. The question is large, how are we adjusting our instructional future, our modes, to
That,
attract
and my
students?
question would be, how are we going to connect with the K-12 system that's feeding into our college? How are those connections going to be made so that we can find out more about the students that are going to be coming to the university?
Right, right.
So, yeah.
Those are excellent. That's exactly what a board should be doing, is thinking of those things. The articles I shared were to give you the thoughts and the ideas, and this is what's happening to flow with that. But for you, it's on those major topics, what are the questions that you have in that regard? Bill, you have any you're thinking about? I mean, I'm putting you on the spot. You're all right, but yeah. You look like you're thinking. That's what. Thinking hard. Yeah.
Well, when I was thinking about it, talking about that, our occasions when board members got in the way, I don't see that. Started feeling like
I was thinking about our examples of when board members got in the way, showed up at campuses, telling the superintendent what was wrong, which is the flip side of what we're talking about. And I don't see that on this board. But as we got into this conversation, yes, that's what I was thinking about. I didn't want to make that comment because I don't see that on this board.
Carol, you feel pretty good about that?
I do, but I
Is
do
there another
wanna-
one we need to get to?
Well, I do want to ask Mark about his perception of, I mean, I want to ask this question with a true understanding and appreciation of what our faculty and staff have done
Good.
over the last 18 months. I mean, the pivot that occurred in instruction was just extraordinary, and the heavy lift that it took from the entire team to make that happen was incredible. Do you think are folks just completely overwhelmed and exhausted, or do we have the ability to continue in this model of change, not model, in this scenario of change? Because I think that's going to be our reality for several years to come. And so I'm curious as to your reaction when we talk about what our students need, what we need to do to attract and retain. How is your faculty and staff doing in this environment of change?
So as well as they can possibly be doing, and I think they're doing better than most compared to what I've heard around the state and in the country from my colleagues. That's the short answer. I think we're going to know the real answer to that question come spring. If we go into spring without another spike in the virus or a virus or any kind of anomaly like that, I think we have to get back to whatever our version of normal's going to be. I don't know if it's 90% normal or it's 75% normal from what was 100% prior to COVID. So I think we have to get through that, because what we're doing is we're getting ready to, we're bringing everybody back for the spring, and we're getting ready to deal with that. That is not going to be easy, because there are people that do not want to come back, and people who just assume get behind the computer and stay there and teach from there, as even when they weren't before. So we're going to have to deal with all of those kinds of issues and say, nope, these are our expectations. Our expectations are we're coming back, and unless you fit in the area of exceptions, which is going to be few, it's going to be what used to be. And so that is going to have it's going to be a bunch of sticky issues with that. I think by mid-spring, I will have a very good answer for you for what will stay, because there'll be innovations, there'll be creative kinds of things, improvements that have come from this that we just don't know about, that are still being exercised on a regular basis. They're improving instruction in some places. They're disproving some things in some cases. And really, the end of next spring will be ideal because we have to go through it. We have to, quote, bring everybody back. And that's not done yet. You know, at best case scenario right now, we're at what, 60%? 60% right now. That's really 50 in my mind. I round things off as much as I can because that's the experience we've had. So if we think about that, you know, we're going to be doing good to get everybody back. 80%, you know, that's a big leap next spring. And quote, that's back to normal. So, I can only give you the answer that we have right now, but it's only half baked. It really is. This spike really put us further back than we thought.
Mark, is that contingent on there not being a spike, though, in January?
Correct.
And there may be one in January.
We are always ready to pivot for things to get worse again. This fall was perfect case in point. We absolutely didn't expect that.
So do we see ourselves ever getting back to pre-COVID, or are we going to embrace online? It seems like there's a place for that as well, and maybe an enhanced role from pre-COVID.
So let me be real frank about that. If it's best for the students, we're going to go back to face-to-face. If it's best for the students to be online, but it's going to depend. It's not going to be a case of it's best for the faculty member or the staff member. It's going to be what's best for the students. And those are the things that we have got to determine. Those are the things. So right now we have schedules being made and folks frankly saying, no, this is the way I want it. Well, I'm sure you do, but that may or may not, that may not happen. And so we're having to deal with those. We're having to set schedules and bring people back, because if it could just stay the same and nobody come back to the campus, for some that'd be perfectly fine. But that's not what's best for the students. So I've said the same. So anyway, stand by.
Mm-hmm.
So we heard a phrase in September at the CAD annual conference in BOTI about this concept of, we've always talked about our students college ready. Our students college ready. It's been out there for a long, long time. And the phrase that I heard for the first time are colleges student ready. And so I'm wondering if there's some conversation some Del Mar College culture conversation around being student ready, and what does that potentially look like? How does the board support that conversation? Because that's what I hear you talking about, is that we have to be student focused and student ready in a way that is unlike anything we've ever done.
So we're having talks about that right now. And that's why we really begin with problem statements every time. What is the problem? Well, students at Del Mar College, according to us, according to everybody in this room, especially on my executive team, realize that they are taking more time to complete than we would like. How do you fix that? Okay, that's the problem statement. And so then we start answering those questions. And we know this is a mini case example. So there's one right there. And so, well, it seems like it's a temporal issue, a time issue. It's time to completion. It's time, the most precious commodity, as they say. So maybe if we shrink that and offer more students 8-week formats and structure that, well, that's one sub-strategy under, that is not the silver bullet for all of this, for this problem. There are others. And as I talk to our academic leadership and student services teams, there are other issues underlying that, such as students pushing off their gateway classes to the end and stretching it out. And so when they're 18 or 21 years old, they come back, and then they jump into developmental ed, and then they get out of that when they do, and then they jump into their core classes, and they push off college algebra, classic case, and then they're 28 by the time they take college algebra. Well, shoot. You can't even say college algebra by then. You know, but so I'm sorry, that's a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
case study right there. I went a little too far, but that's an example of some sub.
So from the board, what's your question? Marcia, how can we,
How do we, as a board, support, create a change for the college to be student-ready? And I'm not saying we're not,
Yeah.
but how...
but the
that-
point is,
that's a-
that's how I want the board to be thinking.
Absolutely, and it's
And that's what I'm trying to
from the
force here.
visionary standpoint.
Yeah,
From the board's role is to articulate the vision of the community and provide the vision for the college.
right.
Okay, and from the visionary standpoint, I know it's a little trickier than what we've been
Yeah.
doing, but we've gotten better at it with this last strategic plan.
Yeah.
In that the plan is student focused. It is a student focused vision. Okay, so how do we refine that? We just need to hear the bigger issues through dialogue.
Yeah.
Reports from the team and those kinds of things, workshops and the like. We're going to present our weaknesses on several issues, and the more as the board can focus its vision around student services, we can put the strategies together and change what we're doing to
And
fix the problems.
They'll focus their vision, but you'll help them get that vision.
Yes.
Because, you know,
Yes.
they're not going to create the vision. All your expertise in you is going to
Yes.
help create vision.
Yeah,
But they're
we
going to
need to
have the question. They're the people representing the community, and they're supposed to work at college. So what I'm forcing is, what is our question? And you said it so well.
Right, because what we hear in context is that community colleges nationwide, community colleges in Texas are
Yeah.
losing enrollment
Right.
for a variety of reasons, most related to COVID. And so, one, we as a board aren't going to be surprised because we've been following some of those same trends in terms of just general enrollment numbers. You know, we decided yesterday that contact hours is because contact hours values all students equally. So that's maybe a new metric we're going to maybe begin to talk about more. But we adopted that strategic plan 2 years ago. And I'm not saying it's invalid, but the assumptions that we made for a year going into that strategic plan have all been turned on their head.
Yeah.
So are we as a board prepared to make significant changes in that strategic plan? Are we prepared to support cultural changes that are going to be necessary for us as a college to react to what is a statewide and national trend in community colleges? We know we have gaps. So there's a lot of conversation, but
Yeah.
I'm really trying to focus on how do we as a board have those conversations and come to agreement, consensus, so that we provide Mark
And that's
the
an amazing goal
right.
that's come through. Keep that, make a note of that.
Make a note of that.
Don't lose that thought. I was almost looking at Natalie as a court recorder to tell us what was that one
What I just
particular
said.
But what's-
question.
Tell me what
Yeah.
Carol just said.
Right.
Let me just say one more thing.
Yeah.
What's different is we do not have the luxury of tweaking the plan.
Yeah.
We have to change it.
Yeah, that's right. All right. I'm glad to hear you say that.
But
And
it should be a living document. A
Yeah.
strategic plan should not, especially when it's long range, because we don't know what kind of changes are going to occur year to year.
Right.
So it's a living document that every year we look at and we change and according to what's happening in our community.
Right.
These next 9 months going into the next year should be focused purely on making the abrupt change and changes necessary to have what we're going to call, I don't know, I'm going to just use the term today, the COVID effect, the COVID environment kind of coming at post-COVID environment kind of strategies to go in and goals and strategies to come into the next academic year.
Yeah, go ahead, Rudy.
Yeah, just along those lines, Dr. Escamilla, I think if you look at COVID, and based on what I've talked to, conversations I've had with some doctors, is that the effects and the spikes and the reoccurring challenges that we're going to have, it's going to be with us for a while. I mean, that's what they're predicting. We're going to have either some different variants, or we're going to have some cases where we thought the vaccine would then lower the infection rate, and it would start to get back to normal disease, where you would just take a booster maybe once in a while and be able to to keep it at bay. But there's likelihood is that we're gonna see these
Yes.
spikes going. So I kind of liken it, or kind of make it similar to hurricanes. And we get through a hurricane, and then we go on back to what we consider normal living, normal activities. And then here along comes another one. This is, I think, coast kind of like Hurricane Harvey, which hit Corpus Christi, then hit, and then went right up the coast and went flooded Houston, and it just kept coming, hitting and hitting Texas over and over. And I just think that if you look at the effects of COVID, and what I think we're going to have to do is a instructional higher institution, or learning of higher institution of higher learning.
Yep,
Anyway,
you got it.
that we're going to have to be able to come up with a plan by which, kind of like a light switch, your staff and your faculty, I don't want to tell you how to do the job, but you have to think in terms
Sure.
of, and we talked yesterday about being flexible and being able to be successful at making change. And so you're going to have where classroom instruction is the most optimum, give us the most optimum result in this day and time, because that's what students are, or I'm going to say we're prepared for and we're expecting. You're going to have periods, I think, where you're going to have in-classroom instruction, and then you're going to have to be able to pivot over to virtual possibly, and then come back to in classrooms within the semester. And so what's that going to look like, and what's it going to take for you to be able to, what do we need to do to help you get to
And
that point?
that's the board question that they're doing a great job, and that's what it is. So, in your comment, I'm not gonna tell you how to do it, but for you, the question is what you said there at the very end, and that's the board piece, and that's what Mark is saying. That's what we wanna know, and that's where we'll go with it, so. If anything's come out of, we had a lot of things come out of the retreat so far, but one is the notion that I think we've really bubbled up is that life has really changed. And what was happening in 2019 in terms of college and instruction and students and their lives is extremely different from what it is today. And then how are we, the college, going to address this? And you're formulating the questions, and Mark's working with the staff to deal with it too. But the more we can put it in some concise terms, the better we'll move in the right direction, the process, so to speak. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, thinking about what Rudy said, yeah, it does seem like we may be dealing with the pandemic for a long time. And I can just look at this board, and I know that people on this board have a different level of tolerance in their personal lives to being out in public or wearing masks or not wearing masks. And I don't think we're going to get homogeneous reaction from our students. They're going to have varying degrees of tolerance. And I'm not sure that all of our students are going to believe that being in the classroom is the optimal solution for them. That's what I was getting at with there's probably always going to be a role for online classes, because we're always going to have students, I think, as long as the pandemic's with us, who are not comfortable in the classroom. And I don't know what the solution is.
No, that's their job.
Yeah, just making
right.
it more complicated for you.
Just so that you can go away with something, it's about 23% of our instruction is online, if I'm not mistaken. Originally, before COVID,
Yeah.
okay? So we know that number went way up, and you can see it in the stat profile and so forth. We suspect that number will go up again to some degree. But just so that you know, prior to the pandemic, it was about 22%.
Right. But his big picture question is instructional.
Yes.
What shifts and what changes are going to happen? He uses the example, maybe they're comfortable online, maybe they're not comfortable, maybe they want to be home, maybe they don't. But his question is, as a board member to the college, is what's going to be the shift so that we have an idea? And that's where, that's what Mark's saying. State the problem, ask the question, state the problem, and let's see where we can go with it at the same time.
The other question might be, has this become also an opportunity for us? It is definitely a challenge for those students who need face-to-face instruction, but is this also an opportunity? Because when we think pre-COVID, institutions of higher ed like Western Governors University or University of Phoenix, even some of the even for-profit, were moving to online instruction as a method to recruit students and learn on your own time. So has this immersion in online instruction and what we have all learned from it actually also become an opportunity for us? Can we game students? Can we actually serve students better by having this flexible hybrid model? So, so again, it's never going to be all things to a monolithic group of students. How do we take what we have learned in the last 24 months and turn that into an opportunity as well?
You know, too, and not getting off, but it even has a bigger picture in the work world. So we all know that the work world, where all these past months people were working at home and got accustomed to that and felt comfortable with it, and now companies are saying, yep, you got to come back. And there's some resistance to coming back. I'm more comfortable at home. I'm more productive at home. So the shift in life in terms of work world is equally as big, but it overlays the instructional piece as well. So here we're dealing with instruction and teaching and learning and what's going to be the impact on that. But the students, that's going to be their life. It's going to be more online, more online life. So I hope you can find those goals in your packet, you know, that you had done. They look like this, that you had. The board goals. That's it. You got it, Nick. We're gonna have to. I'm gonna give you my copy then too. That's it. You got it. You got it. Yeah, it says Del Mar College Board of Regents Action Plan. Action Plan. Keep going, ma'am.
We purposely use that nomenclature because the strategic plan has goals and objectives, and so this is an action plan of the board versus goals, just to help clarify the difference between the board, the college's strategic plan.
They're trying to find it though.
Which one is it?
Yeah, you know, I like to hand these out as I talk about them. Makes it easier. We don't get lost. But then let's see. That's the agenda. So it's more like this. Yeah, here's one. Yeah, and make 3 or 4 copies if you can, so I can give them out right now. They can't. They're having a hard time finding them.
Del Mar College Board of Regents Action Plan.
Yeah.
2-page document.
You got it, man. You got it. The mystery is found. That's it. All right. You got yours. You got yours. Okay. How'd you do, Nick? Okay. Great. We got them. All right. So I just did hand out a little summary from yesterday. And that's just to give you your thoughts. And, you know, some of what we just spoke about, too. Yesterday we talked about post-COVID, valuing all students. Can you find it, Mark? You got yours? You got one of these Hummers?
No, I don't see it. I don't think I ever.
Here we have an extra.
Here we go.
Yeah. All right, good.
I did not give the summary to me.
Here you go. There you go. That's it. But all right. That's all right. Hang on to it there. So I'm going to say, so yesterday, you know, I tried to put in just in a little topical summary some of the thoughts and ideas that we had discussed as a group as well. And so, you know, we did just what we were talking about today. It was the post-COVID, valuing all students. And we got to that credit hour measure, that contact hour piece that got to be kind of a big step forward for us. Understanding the board CEO role, we talked quite a bit about that and bringing that forward. The ethics process, moving forward, we discussed that. Diversity, equity, inclusion is important. That came up with everybody's thoughts as well, and I have that action item agenda in there for you to look at some point too. And serving low-income students and communities. Those were some of the pieces. Then I put on here, off of your charts, what were the concepts you had? Comprehensive delivery plan, guided pathways, outreach, maximizing use of physical assets, Community outreach was one group. Another was growth in industry, outreach to 45% of people, and you can read that then. Marketing, student engagement, and then the others as well. You can look through them and see, but that's what the group pretty much came up with in just their futures notions about what we're coming. It was a good, quick thought about it. So now you have these goals that you've got. So what I'd like you to do, one sheet has just the 4 goals, and the second sheet behind it is identified some of the accomplishments that have occurred with that. So we're going to do this little pairing thing too. So Bill and Ed and Libby and Rudy, Carol and Nick, and Susan and Linda. What I want you to do is look through those goals, all right? First of all, was it achieved? First, was it achieved? Second, should it continue? Should it continue? One, should it continue? And then the third is, what would be a new goal or 2? And we just had this conversation just now, that really this last hour, about many, many things about the strategic plan, instruction, retaining students, financial aid, all of those things. So there's 3, we'll take 10 minutes or so, but go through the goals. Was it achieved? Yeah, I think it was achieved. 2, not quite, we need to continue this particular goal. And third, identify 2 new goals. Some are operational and some are aspirational. So I would also, some of this conversation we just had was just, what do we want to do in operating to be an effective board? But let's have 1 or 2 aspirational goals about some of the things we talked about. So we'll take about 10 minutes, and the 2 of you just share some of your thoughts with that, and we'll come back then. There, I think I'm okay now, right? All right, good, thanks. Okay, so what we'll do is first just do you've had a chance to look at these, and the first notion is, there were 4 of them. Were they generally achieved, or is it something that they should continue? And then we're going to talk about what would be a couple that, for next year, adding on to these if we're going to add on to those as well. So, who wants to start? I'll leave it at that. I'm going to call on somebody then. Carol, do you want to?
Well, okay, go.
Yeah, go ahead. All right, sometimes people are just waiting and waiting. Go ahead, Linda. Good.
So, we really appreciated the goals and felt real comfortable with the work that's been done this last year. I know I've only been on here for a short while, so some of them I was like, hey, has that been done, or did we do that?
Yeah.
And Susan was able to give me guidance on that. So, the topics. One of the things that I first wanted to just briefly mention to see if there might be an interest is, when I looked at them, I asked myself, are these goals, or are these themes, are they in goal language and so forth? I know y'all are tired of hearing me say that, being that K-12 educator, we always had to deal with what we call SMART goals. And SMART is an acronym, and it stands for, the S is specific. Is the goal specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Is it relevant? And is it time-bound? So we loved the goals that you all have put together and feel like they're very strong, but they're not necessarily SMART. So when we asked, how did we measure that? How did we measure that we have documents included in the board agenda? Is that a yes or a no? Well, how many documents? Or which documents? Are some more important than others? And so forth. So those were a couple of things. As we looked through, we felt really good about the work that's been done on all of these. We also felt that they were certainly timely and important. Like number 3, for example, we weren't real sure on updated policies and resources and plans. We've heard reports and we're really excited about that, but that would be an example of one that we really couldn't measure. So what we did was we put together one goal that we might consider, just as an example. And it may seem a little bit long, but it's in the SMART order. So Del Mar Board of Regents will focus on diversity and inclusivity through board reports by college president and leadership staff, quarterly, highlighting initiatives and efforts during the school year 2021-2022. That just gives you sort of an example. Was it specific? You know that it's about diversity, inclusivity, and you know that we're looking for board reports and who's going to do it and so forth. Is it measurable? Yes, we're going to see, did we do it quarterly or did we not do it quarterly? Was it achievable? Were we able to do it in the time year?
Also the measurement of, did we get one initiative? Did we get 5
Yes.
initiatives?
Exactly. And is it time bound? Is it relevant? Right now we're talking about inclusivity. Is it relevant to us? Is it time bound? So that was just an example. We just wanted to mention that. So
That's
I
a
hope
good
that
one.
makes sense. Susan, anything else on that?
Let me mention 2. All right. So I wrote, it's hard to read in the orange. It says diversity progress and diversity. So for the board, the goal could be to, 1, increase the diversity or ensure the diversity of students and staff of the college overall.
I
So
think that
the-
either one of those would work. What
Yeah.
we were looking at is we need as a board, see, because I'm glad you mentioned what you did a little earlier. There are board goals, there are goals, then we may have goals. We want Mark to do this and this, so they're board CEO goals, and then there are organizational goals. So when you separate those, there should be some connection and some alignment, but they are different. The board as a team we have different goals. So when we said we want to focus next year, we'd like to focus on diversity and inclusivity. We could say influence, or we could say, it could be even more specific.
Right.
But that topic. And then we would count on
Right.
him because he knows what the board wants. And
Right.
it gives him a clearer picture. That's
Right.
just sort of a thought.
Right.
Sub-goals under there, though, could be specific to us and board training around that area. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm, sure.
Because it's not just about Mark coming up with a strategic plan around DE&I.
Right.
It's about us also.
That is really good.
Yes.
So your goal is to ensure, your goal is, as a board, is to ensure that Del Mar embraces diversity. And, you know, in some ways with numbers, but be sure that Del Mar College embraces diversity in its faculty, staff, and students. And then, a goal would be for the board to receive training on understanding diversity, equity, and inclusion.
And we talked about DE&I too as a goal, although we didn't specify it, but did talk about basically an equitable chance of success for all of our students.
Right.
Because to say diversity is kind of vague, and yeah, if you just look at the demographics right now, you would say, what's the problem? But we need to dig deeper
Yeah.
to look at completion and, yeah.
And that was
So-
my
and
problem
so
with
the
it
gr-
in terms of measurable, is I didn't particularly want a statistic that says we have 2% more
Right.
minority students or something. It's a hard one to measure.
So I'm
But-
gonna interject, and
Yeah.
again, it's around the nomenclature, because we have goals and objectives in the strategic plan, and I'm real sensitive to not having a separate set of work product out of a board retreat that it isn't enveloped into the college's strategic plan. So what action plan, what does the board want to do in the next year about our operations and policies to impact diversity? And so the board action out of that might be to receive reports and to focus on that, and also to include to adopt a policy that defines DE&I at Del Mar College and includes board training. So there could be 3 specific board actions related to that don't interfere, but that show our actions related to something that is gonna be a college initiative.
Absolutely. You
centric.
don't want to have separate goals that
No.
are not in alignment
Right.
with
Right.
Dr. Escamilla or his leadership staff or the organization. There should be complete alignment, or
Yes.
we're really not doing our job.
And in the idea of diversity and equity and inclusion, I assume that's a major thought and goal within the institution as well. So that it's not out of line with what's going on. So what you're trying to do is decide how can the board, one, its goal is to either ensure, which would mean support the plan, ensure that the diversity and equity action takes place. But Libby's is also saying, in terms of board education, to understand better what that means in terms of diversity and equity and inclusion within an institution. Because it's a big concept and we think we understand, but honestly, when you do get a consultant that understands that and can speak to it, there are principles and policies and points that go with it. And some might be outlined in that document, but you know, you read that document, but I think it's a really wise thing at some point to do a retreat with somebody that can outline those concepts and principles and help you to better understand it. So that is an amazing goal to have. So,
And I hear this, and I look at the statistics, some of the statistics that we were hearing, like for example, the male enrollment is down. And so when we start talking about all students, while we're outreaching to non-traditional students, what are we doing to retain our traditional students? Why are we losing male students? Or why maybe Anglo student population may be going down while we're trying to be more diverse? So when we're talking about all students, I'm assuming we're talking about all students.
that goal, I'm thinking, is one about understanding enrollment trends. So the board, you know, you hear about male students declining, those that are less advantaged economically, some other groups, minority groups. So boards hear all this. But Bill, I think your question is, a goal for the board is to better understand enrollment trends and their causes.
And when we say all students, I'm thinking we mean all students.
Regent Kelly,
In that case, it's enrollment big picture.
you heard me yesterday, when we value all students,
There you go.
all learners equally.
Right.
They're all human beings equally. Absolutely.
That's-
Absolutely is the short answer to
In
your
my
question.
mind, that's the goal.
All right. Put it in one little sentence for me. A goal for the board is to,
Reach out to all students.
all right, reach out and what I was hearing you say
all
initially was
potential students.
understand enrollment trends and causes. Understand enrollment trends and causes for all students at Del Mar College.
Right.
And that's a fabulous goal, because you do get bits and pieces, you get reports, you get these articles that I share, and it's all kind of 5 or 6 concepts that are coming there, but your goal for you, Bill, would be to have a better sense of enrollment trends and their causes.
I think that's certainly a part of it, yes.
Yeah.
But what I like about the conversation around DEI is that we are committing as a board to defining what that means for Del Mar College, going through the process
Right.
of adopting policy, of doing some training, adopting policy, and certainly hearing what the president is bringing forward with his diversity, equity, and inclusion committee,
Yes.
so that we have an understanding of the breadth of that issue,
Right.
and that we as a board commit to developing that conversation and coming up with some definitive actions related to DE&I, so that conversation, we're not going to have that conversation today, but because that's
No.
a lengthy conversation, but the board as an action plan is going to commit to doing that in the next year.
Yeah. And that's
Okay.
your goal, for the
Right.
board to focus on that. It's
And
a
all the
very-
conversations around does all mean all, and if yes, all means all, then how do we do that? How do we define, there's always going to be segments of our student base, and how are we ensuring that policies, that there is an equitable opportunity for all of those students, but all means all.
Right. Well, it's
Yeah.
laudable that we've done apparently a better job of attracting female students, but what are we not doing that's causing us to lose male students? And I think what we're talking about is making the tent bigger, as opposed to it being a zero-sum game where if we are making wins in one area, we're getting losses in another. That's what I'm saying.
And that's where the data is key, and I think it's important. I'm so glad, Brad, that you mentioned trends, because what I thought I read was that the decline, particularly in white male students, seemed to be related to COVID specifically. And so I'm not sure we have a trend over years of that being a challenging group for us. Whereas we do have some data that shows over years some of the other populations that perhaps have not been at the levels we would like them to be.
Yeah.
So
Right.
even what we heard when we were in San Diego is to keep it focused on the data. The data will tell us, especially when we look, and Dr. Ramirez is, Wilson is shaking his head, tell us, where our opportunities really exist.
And Libby, I think you're right too. The training piece helps you to formalize your thoughts on all of it and understand what you want. The San Diego conference, that was generally the theme. The ACCT conference in San Diego was focused largely on DEI. And I did a pre-conference workshop, and Carol assisted with it, about 50 people in the room, and it was on board effectiveness and that sort of thing. And we had the list of and I have a notion of here of what things should be included in board effectiveness. And immediately, the board chair of color, or the board person of color from Philadelphia said, you're missing the DEI part. And it's easy to miss it, and it's not. But so if there's a focus that this is important, and it is something we have to do, but we have to make a concerted step, and it's a concerted effort to ensure that we do attend to it. And that's for the board, that's your goal, is to learn more about it so that you can ensure that it happens. And, you know, I'm sure it's on Mark's radar and all these people here as well. It's not something brand new, but it can be new for the board to understand it in a very much more comprehensive way.
As maybe if we're moving on after this, but as a parting shot for that, for the weekend anyway, for y'all's consideration, it's going to be more, at Del Mar College, it's going to be more about the operational practices, the instructional practices, than it is the numbers of the head count and faces of the groups. I'm not saying it's not going to be about that, because Anglo males, and that's an issue. That number's a little shaky to me in my head too. There's reasons for it. We'll figure that out. But it's more, I think, about the educational practices. What are we doing? What is the institutional? How are the institutional practices equitable for all learners? I think that is the common denominator, or thematic denominator for us to consider. That's going to be it.
And see, and that's what you would learn in a diversity workshop. You know, what does it mean? What are all the components that go with diversity and equity and inclusion? So it is the instruction piece. It's how you treat students at student services. It's how faculty treat students in the classroom. It's all those things. And for a board to understand that is a very outstanding goal.
How do you measure that?
Oh, you'd have to get your consultant to come here and tell you. But, you know, that's what you would largely do. I'm not really, you know, I know generally about it. If you did bring somebody in that was really skilled in that area, and I'm sure ACCT can recommend, and you can check too, but people who have that big picture and can tell you how an institution should be thinking of it and can answer your question certainly better than I could.
At the last conference that we went to, I know Rudy and I went to one of the conference sessions, and I think your point is great. How do we measure it? And this isn't necessarily a way to measure it, but remember, Rudy, they had a checklist, and we feel like a lot of the stuff is done here at Del Mar, and we had such pride being able to say that we were from Del Mar. But as we went through the checklist, we didn't know if it had been formalized. For example, a diversity and inclusivity office. Well, what about the coursework? What about the statement? Is it on your website? And they asked us all these things, and we weren't real aware, but we're both new board members. So we didn't know if that has been done. Those are some ways you can at least measure a focus on diversity and inclusivity.
Yeah. Your goals here, you know, go ahead, Carol. Your goals here, and we'll go back to them, are pretty operational, the four, and we'll check these. These are pretty aspirational in terms of big picture of what you want to know as a board, and once you start to learn it, it starts to impact the college and the direction for the institution in some way. So, yes.
So I was going to, I've drafted some stuff here, and I'll get your notes, and so what we bring back to the December board meeting will be in draft form for the board to agree on.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
I wanted to move on to the understanding enrollment trends and causes.
Okay.
There was a number of the board that attended, again, the CAT Annual Conference, Board of Trustees Institute. And the action plan that came out of that around student success had a lot of questions around enrollment. And so I'll list these, but don't have to worry about taking them down.
Go ahead.
What students in our service area are not pursuing any post-secondary education? Again, that gets back to the 45%.
Right.
Special programs for a high school class of 2021 in the next several years. Understanding the disaggregated data around student success. What students are we not reaching? And then this idea of a personal connection. And I'm going to go back to, there was another piece of that. So these are all connected.
Yeah.
Around supporting a culture of change for student success. Looking at proactive personal connections, creating that familial relationship on the Del Mar College campus. We talked about mandatory student orientation, having proactive, intrusive services. So I'm going to collapse all of that into
Yes.
some work around enrollment and student success.
Yeah.
So understanding enrollment for student success.
All right.
Or maybe for community success. So if we understand enrollment for community success, then that's going to incorporate some of those marketing questions we've had. It's going to incorporate what kind of resources and policies do we have? Are there sufficient resources and policies to provide that kind of advising and counseling? Do our policies reflect student-centered, student-ready campus or student-ready college? So that I'm going to collapse all of those into some conversations. Is that as part of our aspirational goal? Is that too much, or do you think those things are separate? Is understanding data different than policies for student success?
I think, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Mark.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's when you're focused towards student success, and I think you're pointed in the right direction for sure. I think it's absolutely where we need to be headed, and then underneath that, the problem statements need to come from that. What are the problem statements around student success? / what are the practices
Yeah.
and even policies at the college that affect all that roll up into that student success umbrella?
The key word that I'm hearing from you in these aspirational goals is understanding. So, these are not goals that specifically are going to be in a plan, in the strategic plan, but they're goals for you as a board member that you want to know about. You want to understand the diversity and equity. You want to understand the enrollment trends, and that's a big piece. So that's what you want. So
I'm going to push back. I don't think it's understanding. I mean, yes, we want to start with understanding the problem, but the board wants to drive some of these big systemic cultural conversations. And maybe drive is the wrong word, but we want to be intimately involved in these big cultural conversations. It's not enough just to understand. How does the board drive a student-centered or a student-ready college district? How does the board drive a relationship, a proactive, intrusive, familial relationship with our students? How do we support our students? And I'm not saying our individual work, but how does the board drive that culture? I'm hearing more than understanding.
Well, I was going to say support, though. I'm sort of torn between us partnering with Mark and us directing Mark and staff and creating even more work for them. And so I like the word support, partner with, and keep coming back to your direction of us asking the question and then allowing Mark to direct where the answer, how to answer the question, if you will.
Carol, if I can help with this,
Yeah.
what your statement that I hope you don't let go of is community
Yeah.
success. It's in our vision statement. What is community success? Okay, that is even a bigger visionary statement or topic. That right there, if we can work together to define what we're doing to improve student and community success, student under community success, you can really get, I think we can get somewhere. But I think to answer your other question about, or statement about what the board does to drive this, you drive that visionary conversation every month. As much as you need to and want to and can, this board puts it on the agenda. I mean, it needs to be a regular conversation, and at the visionary level, it's this group right here that drives that.
But the words then, we'll go to the words. The action verbs that go with it. But understand, I think there is a sense you want to understand it, but then maybe that is the second step, what you're saying, Carol. We want to understand it, but we want to support and drive this as well. We want to make sure that it happens in the institution. So your goals can be understand and support and drive these things. And I think it is two-pronged to go with that sort of thing. So if you learn about DEI, then how do you make sure it happens? How do you, from a policy point, how do you make sure that it happens from what you're doing? And if enrollment, and Bill's thought, big picture enrollment, I want to understand it, and then how do we drive it to as best we can. And your part, you're driving it by letting Mark know what you're thinking, and Mark shares back as well. Here's what we're doing, and my staff is working on these things. That creates the conversation for a college.
When you start talking about enrollment, and Carol was saying maybe it's too big of an issue, very broken down, I think we were talking about it in the context of attracting students, but I also see it in retention of students, but those may not necessarily be the same thing. Those might be two different conversations, although I see an awful lot of overlap. The more successful our students are, the better we are going to be at attracting more students. And I want the college to be perceived as being open to everybody and everybody being welcome.
Right.
I'm thinking more big tent as opposed to zero-sum game. And I don't see any segment as the villain. And I understand we're operating in a larger cultural conversation that's going on right now. And I think we need to be above that.
Regent Kelly, you'll hear more about it here in a couple of weeks. We always begin with the students we have, keeping those first.
Did we agree that we have to understand the data first? Yes. Okay.
And that's the understand piece.
Okay.
So, the two that we've come up with, the aspirational, is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and overall enrollment. And Bill, it is the new student, and it's retaining the students as well. So enrollment is, I never saw those two as separate. You're trying, when students are here, you want them to complete. You want to complete their courses, their certificates, and their degree, and stay with it. And then the institution invests in strategies and resources to make sure that the student, to do the best you can to keep the student from leaving in a lot of ways. Two aspirational goals. And Carol, we're all right. There's two verbs, understand and support. I think, one is to understand it, and then support and drive. And drive that particular goal is what I think we're trying to do. And leading? Yeah. Those are two big ones. And that might be enough for right now as well. I don't know, Carol, do you want to go through the four and just see what we're doing, or do you want to...
I'll offer a quick synopsis of what Nick and I talked about. We felt like, from the operational standpoint, that we need to keep the policy review on there until we finalize those actions. So as an operational action plan, let's keep it on one more year. We think we can eliminate the one on reviewing board practices for efficiency and effectiveness. That doesn't mean the executive committee won't continue to focus on making sure that our agendas are sufficient and that big reports come out earlier, but we don't think that needs to be continued as an action plan for the coming year. We think we need to have some continued discussion on COVID response, less related to the crisis response and now related to supporting student learning. So what coming out of COVID and what do we continue to need to focus on as it relates to student learning? So change that focus from crisis response to student learning. And then when we talk about the strategic plan, from an operational standpoint, what changes need to be made to the college's strategic plan, because we have been able to keep the board up to date on its in the reporting and those kinds of things. And we've had Regents, and that's, the materials have been part of our new onboarding. So some of the tactics under that have been accomplished, but I think the next focus needs to be on what changes need to be made to the strategic plan. And whether that's changes to the strategies and objectives, or is it a change to the KPIs? Staff's going to have to come back to us with us, but I think we need to clearly state that we are comfortable with changes to that strategic plan. So, eliminating one completely, but changing the focus of the other three, but keeping them on as.
Which one did you eliminate again?
Number 2.
Number 2, all right. Good.
And that's what we did as well. We would have eliminated number 1, too, but if you're talking specifically about just keeping it there until we wrap up the ad
Yes.
hoc policy work, that sounds,
And until staff finishes, staff was coming back with that major policy
Yes.
review as well. So I think when those 2 pieces are checked off, then it becomes maintenance for us as part of ongoing.
Sure.
But because that was such a significant piece of work over the last couple of years, we want to keep it on there for that a little bit longer.
that sounds good. And then our new goals fit here,
Yeah.
so we're good.
All right, we'll write it out, but the understanding, support, drive, and lead, DEI, and enrollment is a big picture. Very nice. So you'll get to clean those up. Those are good board goals. So, I mean, that turned out great. Better than I thought. So not that I expected it not to, but I think that really is the kind of thinking for a board to have about where they want to go, and it helps you give you the direction for the next year and the things that you're trying to accomplish, and it helps you to focus, you know, who you are as a board and your relationship to the college. So, nice work. Our last piece for the retreat, and if we go over past 11, is that all right, or do you need a hard stop at 11?
Does
If we do
anybody
till
need a hard stop at
11:15,
11, or can we spend a?
I mean, I can do it either way, but, what's that? All right, well, let's say it may be 10 minutes, all right? I wouldn't, not till 1 o'clock, all right, how about that? And we'll just go a little further than that, but let me give you this, these little notes for us to work with. If I hand them out, I'll make sure you got them, you know, you don't have to dig through all that, all those goodies. Look at all those notes, Carol.
I know.
That's great. You don't have to sort through them. All right. All right. So this objective in our retreat was about another kind of big picture thought about being a high-performing board. That's what we were talking about, and your effectiveness in that regard. So what I did here was, one piece is just general standards of what you as a board generally should do. Did I give one to you, Mark? Sorry about that. There you go. Call on me next time. Hey, man, what about me? I'm here. Let's see. Okay, so, you know, generally a checklist for board governance is these things. So I'm going to read just through the headings and just make a note. You know, 1 is low, 2 is medium, 3 is high. Just how you're doing. And this is really just for you. You know, we're not going to, this is just for you to, yourself. You know, just at your own notes, just to have, and what, you know, what you do as a board and how you're doing that. So, 1, pretty operational, you define the standards for college operations. And it lists a few things there about policies and fiscal policies. And as a group, are you 3, a 2, or a 1? 3 being highest. How are you doing with that? The second one is monitor institutional performance. And a lot of that was getting data, working with the president, making sure things are happening the way that you think they should happen. So is that a 3, a 2, a 1 in terms of yourself? Another one is to create a positive climate. And that's a lot of what we generally say, that a board's responsibility is to, you know, what you say and do, and everybody hears it today. So, you know, what you say and do, creating a positive climate. So do you feel that you as a board are 3, 2, 1 doing a positive climate? Support and be advocates for the college. Collectively. Collectively. Are you supporting and you're advocating for the college? And the fourth one or the fifth one there is leading an as educated team. And we talked a good bit about that just now, about learning more about a variety of issues. But do you feel like you're leading as an educated team? So that's just for you to have and keep in your mind. So, the next sheet, right behind it, this gentleman named Mark Bridges, he defines, and just be thinking about yourself as I'll read through this quickly, but this is about how you can be as effective as you can be. So he defines a low-impact board. He says the directors, regents, and the low-impact boards are observed to execute at the basic level functions such as assuring compliance, evaluating financial reports, analyzing portfolio expansion options. The low-impact boards focus on eliminating biases from their decision. Only a minority of directors in this group practice human resource rationalization, deliberation on strategic alternatives, portfolio synergies creation, and strategic alignment. So he says the lower impact board, generally a grade of a C, it's doing what it should do, but not everybody's engaged. There's a couple that are engaged in the various functions that you do. So there's a low impact, grade of C. Moderate impact boards, maybe a B. Boards with moderate impact are observed incorporating trends and adapting to new changing environmental conditions, which we've talked about. The focus of moderate impact boards is on analyzing strategic alternatives, which is a good thing. And the majority of directors in these boards practice adjusting strategy based on environment, talked about that, staying ahead of trends, engaging in innovation, and analyzing portfolio diversification. So they're focusing much more on things that are involved with that. The majority of the directors are. So this gentleman says then high-performing boards, the A, and Linda, you know a lot of this, a large majority of directors in this group, regents in this group, are seen actively taking part in performing all the key functions of their board practice. And we have, in this retreat, we've gone over a number of what the board does and what you as individuals, the board members, do. High-impact boards have an even richer set of strategic priorities than the low, moderate impact boards. In performance management, for example, more involved boards conduct regular performance discussions with the CEO, examine leading indicators, and aspire to review robust non-financial metrics. High-performing boards look inward, analyze value drivers, discuss alternative strategies, and evaluate the distribution of resources. More engaged boards do not limit a CEO's right to set a company direction. In fact, they're supportive of the management. What do you think of those? Ed, what do you?
What I think of them?
Yeah,
I think they're pretty comprehensive
yeah,
and very challenging
yeah,
to work your way up from the low impact to the high performance.
yeah, right. Where do you think you fall?
Fall in different areas.
Mm-hmm.
I think we meet all the criteria for the low impact, but as we work our way up, it's more and more difficult to say that we're accomplishing those.
Okay.
I see them as concentric circles.
Yeah.
Even if we aspire or reach high performance board, that does not mean we should not be doing what's been defined as a low impact board.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with Ed. Have to absolutely be doing what's defined as a low impact board.
Mm-hmm.
And then reach out for the more aspirational goals.
Mm-hmm.
It, to a large extent, seems like what this whole workshop's been about.
Yeah, yeah, good. Linda, you want to share any of your thoughts? I know I've.
I was hoping you were going to go all.
Okay, all right. You know what? We'll just see. Any, you know, I don't have a point, but do you have any thoughts you want to share?
No, I love
Ping pong
the
table.
analysis of each one of them. I agree with both of my dear friends over there. I think, but even when I look at a low-impact board, that's not a bad
No,
board, it's a
no.
low-impact board.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to remember that. You know, when I look at all the different attributes of a low-impact board, I go, okay, yes, yeah, we do that, yeah, we do that. Yeah. But where we go to the minority of directors in this group, I think the majority of us have that great intent to really move toward this high performance.
Yeah,
I don't know if we have the skill set yet to get there.
that's a good
I
point.
think that this is what we're trying to do with this workshop.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
A really good point.
I'll just say, I agree. If I had just read the middle paragraph about a moderate impact board, I would have said, yeah, that's us and that's good.
Right, right.
And then you go, oh, yeah, there's something else
Yeah,
there.
right,
And I
right.
think that's what we need to keep remembering is just sometimes the lack of controversy or lack of problems
Yeah.
can be very,
All right, there's a book called Blink, you know, Blink, Malcolm Gold? Yeah, who is it, Malcolm? Gladwell, right. His notion is, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but sometimes your first thought is right. You know, if you think things through, you think too much, but sometimes the initial in management, your initial thought is the right one. May not be true or may not. So, here's what I'm going to ask you. Do a little blink, all right? My question is, what one thing could you do as a board to be a high-impact board? You get 1 minute, all right? What could you do to be a high-impact board? You can just write it down in front of you there. What's the one thing you could do collectively to be a high-impact board? Should have a little Jeopardy music. All right, we'll just go around. Here we have keep notes, and you know we can use this at a later date then. So, where do you want me to start? I don't know, Rudy. What do you think? What do you have?
Quite frankly, looking at this, I'm guilty, you know, probably. I think we're at moderate impact boards, but
Yeah.
also, like I said, thinking that I've been involved where we've been low impact boards, and some of the things that I tend to look at first is all the financial
Right.
things that
Financial.
focuses on. But I think that in this particular point, I'm going to agree with what on a lot that Carol's been doing. To focus on processes.
Okay.
If we focused on processes, make sure that Mark's processes and the process of his departments when they come back are relevant or good or headed in the right direction, I think we could reach being a high-performance board.
All right.
We wouldn't have to be looking at all the details.
These are brainstorming, so focus on processes. Libby?
Nope. No, I'm kidding. I would say yes, and what struck me is looking inward. And by that I mean kind of what we've done here, certainly, and just holding ourselves accountable to operating as a board in such a way that we can best support Mark.
All right.
I'm kidding.
That'll keep these, make sure you're keeping these records. Yeah.
Gosh darn it, Libby. That's what I had circled too.
Yeah.
And when I'm looking at that, I'm actually thinking that's individual board members looking at their own motivations and being open to other points of view.
Yeah.
And amenable to conversation, even pointed conversation where we disagree, but in a respectful way.
Perfect. And we talked about that earlier too. Ed?
To get to the high-performance board, for me, it's going to require more time and more education on my part, and I
Yeah.
suspect on most other people's part
Right.
as well. I don't know that stuff.
Yeah, that's good. More time commitment and understanding better. That's good. Carol, I always let you have the last word. unless you
No,
wanna go
I'll
ahead.
go in the middle.
Okay.
I'm going to say, looking at leading indicators.
Okay.
So, my John Carver training back in the day,
Right.
20, 25 years ago, was that even looking at financial reports is rearview mirror stuff.
Yeah.
And that that boards ought to be focused on what's in front of them, not what's behind them. And so looking at stuff that's already happened in the past, we spend a lot of time doing that, but we really ought to be looking at leading indicators and looking at what's in front of us, looking at environmental stands, those kinds of things, what's in front of us.
Nice. And that's what, some of what came out of that goal. Nick?
Open dialogue.
Okay.
Keep on talking with Mark, you know.
Right. And we had a lot of
How can we support you, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
open dialogue and support the CEO. And we had a lot of discussion about that earlier in the retreat. Susan?
Well, I'll disprove Gladwell because my blink phrase that I came up with was to take deeper dives. And then I
Okay.
realized I worried that sounds like getting into the weeds, and it was the opposite of what I was intending.
Yeah.
Which is just get a deeper, I like the phrase, a richer set of strategic priorities.
Yeah,
Something
right.
deeper than just coming in and touching the
It's
high.
understanding.
It is
It's
also
the
an understanding,
understanding piece,
educating.
to have a greater chance of understanding. And Linda, we gave you the last. Yes, okay.
I was really intrigued with the last statement. More engaged boards do not limit a CEO's right to set a company's direction. In fact, they're supportive of management. And my question to myself was, if we had a discussion, which I know we're not, but if we had a discussion, where are we on that as far as, and then what is Mark's perception of, do we limit him? And so what can I do is, I think, is to make sure we have the best CEO, which I'm so proud to say and sit next to you, and not limit him to set the company's direction. That doesn't mean not asking questions. It doesn't mean not looking inward and taking active part in all of the key functions of a board practice, but not limiting him and letting him do his job.
Right.
That's what I would do.
Those are great. Those are really good things to have in a retreat and have in notes. And then there'll be some follow-up, but there can be follow-up training on those kind of things. We've had a real good start this last 2 days, on some of those things, but you really have given a lot of thought to what you are as a board and your function as a board and your effectiveness as a board, and which is what we really were trying to do in this as well. In summary, just just tell me the one thing you're taking away from this retreat. Give you a chance to think, but what's your biggest takeaway from this last 2 days of being here? Bill? Yeah, go, man.
Biggest thing for me is the opportunity to get to know my partners on the board better, and understand better where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And to me, that there's nothing more important to a high, maybe not
Performing board.
performing, but high functioning
Right.
Governing body.
Mm-hmm.
And so separate and apart from all the substantive things that we may have been dealing with, I think that was, to me, the most important
Right.
thing
Getting to
that
know
came
your
out of
colleagues.
this retreat.
Right. That's fabulous. That was one of our major objectives, and that's good. So, go ahead, Libby.
Yeah, the word that came to mind certainly too was gratitude for me, gratitude of my fellow regents and this time together, and also an excitement for what we do next, now that we
Yeah.
have sort of establish this camaraderie again now that we're back in person. And looking forward to what's to come next for us.
Rudy, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Yeah, without a doubt, getting a little closer to my fellow regents has been the biggest takeaway,
Yeah.
bar none. And I also think that we touched on a lot of areas where we have some challenges, but we think that
Right.
we're optimistic about how we're going to handle
Yeah.
those challenges. And again, I've learned a lot in this
Yeah.
particular process, so thank you
Well,
very
that's
much.
what retreats are for.
Yeah.
It's exactly different than a board meeting. It's a retreat to really focus on some of those things. Ed,
Clearly getting to know the board members, but in addition to that, more clearly defining the line of demarcation between the board and administration, and understanding that line much better.
Great. You get last word, Carol. The chair gets last word. Nick, go ahead.
Direction,
Okay.
a cohesiveness between the board, and, that's important, Are we all on the same page? Let's make sure,
Yeah.
understanding. But, one thing, for as long as I've been on the board, and if I have never said this before, Mark, you have a great staff, and I'm amazed at the work that these guys do over and over again, and I brag about you guys, I do. But again, I haven't had the opportunity, but now that everybody's here, I wanted to say it, and let everybody know, I am proud of you. I'm proud to be a board member, and I'm proud to be associated with Del Mar.
Great. That's good. Susan? go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'll echo that first, that I'm
Yeah.
proud, you all make us look good. We sort of waltz in every now and then and ride the wave of what you've done, so I'll echo that, but also saying, I think I felt like I've come away from this with a reminder of our shared aspirations. And it's not that I didn't know those things, but it just being reminded gives me the commitment to keep it up.
That's great. Linda?
Sure. Anytime I think that you go to a retreat, whatever kind of retreat it is, a relational retreat, I think there should be a sense of renewal and recommitment.
Yeah.
And even though I've been on the board, 4 months or so, even at that, I feel like I'm walking away with a sense of excitement of
Yeah.
what's to come, and
Right.
a sense of recommitting, and thinking about all students and what can happen to our community if we continue to educate them and give them that pathway. So it's just
Good.
a really good sense of renewal and recommitment.
Right. Mark, you want to make any little comments? It's at the end of this retreat, so.
Yeah, I think this past few days has been an opportunity to reset knowledge of each other, about each other, and those kinds of things for sure. I think that's that counseling part of me that we were talking about earlier a couple days ago. And I think it's been an opportunity to reset the process for revisioning the college. Okay, I think that's what's in front of us, or in front of you all, really. I think it's time, because of where we are, because of COVID, because of all those things, and because of COVID and other things, that's what I'm excited about. Because I've said it too many times, and I know my staff, my team is really tired of hearing about the 13 years. I've been here 13 years. The reason why I say that so much is because I need a reset really badly.
Yeah.
I need a reset. I think every decade a person might ought to consider redefining and or resetting themselves. And that's what I've been fishing for. But this past 2.5 years, I didn't get a chance to do it, and I haven't. It's all survival mode, literally survival mode. So that being said, what I'm excited about is the idea to have gotten some major initiatives behind us. Still a few on the table, still quite a few on the table, but major ones behind us in such fantastic fashion and success. But to then now here with my team, with me going forward, what that reset is about and what that revisioning is about, focused on student success and a culture that is college-ready for students, that kind of thing, that's something. I'm looking forward to it.
Good. Carol?
Well, I can't help but appreciate the passion and the commitment and the caring that we have expressed over the past 2.5 days together. That when I hear the level of discussion and our ability to dig in and even maybe have some disagreements on
right.
exact wording, and I mean, we'll get there, but
Yeah.
when I stop and think about the commitment and the best of bringing 9 different people together in a room with a common cause, 10 including our CEO, but we come from very, very different backgrounds. And yet we are all sitting at this table. We have all made a personal choice to be at this table and to commit this time, and to hear that passion and to hear that shared intelligence and that shared commitment is just exciting to me. A little bit overwhelming, and I'm a little bit concerned that staff has had such a difficult couple of years between strategic plan and accreditation and COVID and other things that we've accomplished. So I have a little bit of concern about not overwhelming people, but we are so excited about what I think is an opportunity to really, as you said, maybe set a new course. And I just think there's thrill in that.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of thrilled. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that's what retreats are supposed to do. You know, you come together and you go through conversation, and I think your point too, you know, we spoke about the things that we're all in agreement with and that we feel good about, but we had our conversations about where there were differences and where we should see things in a different way and moving that way. So here today, these last 2 days was kind of a launch. As I said, we'll put notes together, but you will need to keep following up on these things as well. It's a real good start. And the fact that it's refreshing, and Mark is starting to see it's a new day, and we've expressed that it's a new day, and we're trying to go that way, and Carol has too, is exactly what we really hope to do. So with that, I will tell you, there's an evaluation form in that packet on the left-hand side. So if you just want to take a second and complete that, you can put it in this envelope, which I'll put over here somewhere. I'll put it right next to Mark. And then just put that in, just gives a little feedback. But with that, thank you for the opportunity to work with you these last 2 days. I got to know Corpus Christi, and I got to know Del Mar quite well, and I got to know each of you in a nice way. And so maybe I'll be seeing you at professional meetings here and there as well. So. Yeah, I could help you with that. We could have a nice time. That's great. So anyhow, thank you very much.
Thank you, Brad.
Yeah.
So I'm going to allow folks to continue that evaluation at their own speed.
Okay.
I do want to formally thank you, Dr. Ebersol, for leading us. We appreciate the support from ACCT, and I think this has been, in my tenure on the board, the best board retreat that we've had to work on this together. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
With that, unless there are other comments from board members, I'm going to formally adjourn the meeting. And again, please continue to fill out your evaluation. But this board meeting is adjourned at 11:04 a.m.
Right.